Good morning, soul travelers. Welcome to another episode of Death Stories Living Truth. This is Janae of Living Truth, and today's story was uploaded by @IANDS, that's IANDS videos. So @IANDS videos, if you'd like to follow them or subscribe to them, please do. I hope you enjoy today's video. It is an NDE, which is a near-death experience. If you have not heard of that, definitely check it out. They're so interesting to listen to, and there's thousands, millions of people who have experienced it. So check it out. It's really interesting. Let's get into it.
There was none of this silly stuff, and though I did accomplish a lot. I went to Vassar, I graduated Phi Beta Kappa, and I had, honors on my dissertation and general honors and just all the stuff, all the things, as people like to say. But that was when the ball was kind of just getting rolling on my alcoholism. So after I graduated, I moved to New York City because I thought I would be able to party better there. And I will just say that while I was very selfish and very vain and not very loving at 22, my heart was torn by the homeless in New York City because I'd never seen that before. And I just could hardly stand to walk by them. We lived by, my roommate and I lived by a halfway house, and sometimes we'd hear people at night screaming who were crazy. And one night there was this woman screaming, "God, just take me now, just take me, I can't stand it." And my roommate went, "God," and on a hot night too, and we have to close the window. Like, she felt nothing. And so I would say that despite all this kind of superficiality about me, I had a heart. So that's the only way I can explain where I went when I died. So let's tell that story. I went to a nightclub with the best friend of my secret boyfriend who had just broken up with me. There was a lot going on at that time when I was 22. He was a coke dealer. He brought a lot of coke. We did a lot of coke before we got there. And when we were at the nightclub, we were dancing and doing the cocaine. And I was feeling really, really high and just feeling my ego just swelling up to the point where I finally felt like I was enough. Because like most young women, and especially alcoholic ones, I was very, very insecure. So we ran out of cocaine and we had some cash. So we started asking around, where can we buy some? And we bought some from a shady looking guy. I just remember him having on a beige leisure suit and being in his 20s, upper 20s or something. Anyway, he gave us a baggie. We paid him for it. He said, it's good stuff. And he disappeared. We had tested it on our lips and it had made them numb. So we started snorting it and it did nothing. It did nothing. Then we snorted more. It did nothing. And then my date said in disgust, "This is doing nothing for me." And he threw down his bill that we were snorting with. He was a coke dealer. I think he was a little bit more of a connoisseur than I was. And I just thought with my logic, well, if I do the whole pile, maybe I'll get a little bit high. So I just snorted the whole thing right then and there. And then I screamed in his ear that I was going to go to the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom, and that's when I started to develop tunnel vision. And it was because, unbeknownst to me, that was not even any part of it cocaine. After I got sober, and I got a lot of friends in AA who used to be drug dealers, they said, more than one said, "You were probably sold lidocaine." We used to cut cocaine with it in the 80s because it's much cheaper than cocaine. But it sounds like what you were given, if it didn't get you high at all, was pure lidocaine, which is just an anesthetic. And when you ingest it systemically, it shuts down your automatic nervous system. So among other things, your heart stops. So does breathing naturally stop. Or automatically. So when I was in the bathroom, my brain was getting less and less oxygen, and it was starting to get very speckly, those kind of orange speckles that you get when you're going to faint, and they were kind of closing in more and more, and I just wasn't scared. I just thought, oh, cool, this must be a side effect of cocaine that nobody told me about. But then it started getting so dark I could hardly see, and I couldn't read, any of the graffiti in the bathroom stall, and I came out in kind of a panic, feeling like there was no air in the nightclub because my heart was probably down to like 30 beats a minute, I would guess. Anyway, it didn't how deeply I breathed, nothing would get to my brain. So my date said, let's get you some water. He took me to the bar. The bartender held out a glass of water, which I did not want, but just to please them, I took it and I took a sip. When I took the sip, that's the moment when I left my body. Back here on Earth, I had a grand mal seizure and hit the floor and banged all around on it, having this horrible thing, and then had a cardiac arrest. Anyway, it didn't matter. Then the bartender came out trying to do CPR
I couldn't imagine what that would feel like. Like your heart is just stopping and you don't even realize what's happening.
So what was happening for me was at the moment that I left my body, I felt something strike me under the chin, and I had a very brief thought, did I collapse and hit my chin on the bar? But then I realized, no, whatever hit me had shot me up in the air, and I just shot straight up out of that nightclub. And I just had a brief, very brief sense of leaving behind the island of Manhattan, and with it, all the nonsense. That's how I thought of it. All that nonsense. And that nonsense was my life as Louisa. I just felt like, oh, I'm so glad I don't have to do that silly thing anymore. And so that was gone, and I was just shooting up into a clear blue sky with the ocean going around from horizon to horizon, nothing but sky and ocean, and both were beautiful blue. And I shot up, and I had this thought that I could do a back bend, sort of like Esther Williams, and into a swan dive into the ocean, and I pulled it off. It went just perfectly, and I was quite pleased with that. Then I'm diving from great height towards the ocean, and I just had a brief thought. Won't it be like concrete when I hit it? You know, isn't that what I've always heard from people jumping off bridges? So I wasn't really scared. I just thought, And then when I hit it, I dove way down deep in it and everything was fine. But then I thought, wow, how am I going to get up to the water? I've been so far down. Next thing I know, I'm at the surface. I look and I see the shoreline and I want to be there. Next thing I know, I'm waving out. I'm wading out of the ocean. And these things that I'm just there, that it's just happening, all they do is kind of please me. I don't feel like, how did that happen? I don't feel puzzled. Why didn't I have to swim? You know, it just pleases me that, yeah, that's where I want to be. And now I'm there. And so I looked down the beach, which was sadly not a beautiful tropical beach. It was a northwest beach, which, as you know, is all barnacle-y and rocky. And so it was that kind of beach. And down a long ways, I saw a weather-beaten house up on a mesa. And I thought, that has to do with me. I want to be there. But instead of getting to the house, I got to the foot of the mesa, which was now a huge pile of slimy, gross rocks. I don't remember any stink. But I remember the brief thought, is this rotten seaweed or some kind of like poop? Like I just didn't know. It was so gross. But I was really determined to get to that house. So I climbed the rocks. I had a big sense of can do. Unfortunately, when I reached the house, I had somehow lost my body. So I was now about this far from the door sill as I passed over it. And I was just kind of a subjective camera eye that low to the ground, which I was not really pleased with. I was kind of like, I hate this. Why did I lose my body? You know, I can't say I said, why did I lose? But I just thought this is inconvenient that I'm so low to the ground. But as soon as I crossed over the threshold, I became thrilled with the knowledge and the insight that this was a threshold that all my ancestors had crossed. Going way, way back and coming all the way up to my grandmother and grandfathers now. And I could feel them happy. They weren't so much in the house as around it. They could see me. They could see me entering the house and it pleased them. And I, in my 22-year-old regular life, did not give a crap about my ancestors. I never, not anybody who even wants to know the names, my family was alcoholic and troubled, so I didn't even know who my cousins were. But on the other side, it meant everything to me, and I had a sense of honor. Like, I am so honored to follow my ancestors. But there was supposed to be a chair in the middle of the main room that looked out through a great big window at the ocean, and now the sun was setting. And I knew that all my ancestors loved to sit in that chair and admire the sunset. And I just had a feeling of like, well, that's no fair. How am I going to see it? There's no chair and I can't. Anyway, something grabbed me by the sternum at that point and pulled me across the floor. And I had a sense of, whoa, and then went up and over and out the window. And as I went up and out the window, I had another just tremendous sense of thrill. I wasn't sure what was happening, but it was wonderful, whatever it was. And the next thing I know, I was zooming across the water, just over the water, and the sun was setting and it was leaving a path of bright reflection. And I followed that straight toward the sun. And the deliciousness of that feeling of zooming, I just can't describe. But then I had a interrupting skeptical thought. So a little bit of me was still there. And I just thought, wait a second, this is flying in wonderful circumstances. Isn't that a dream thing? Is this real? And then someone answered and said, more real than anything back there. I was not expecting to be answered. And I couldn't see who had answered me or anything, but at the same time, I could feel it was a very sort of powerful voice. And I had to say, yeah, you're right, it is. And so at that point, the sun started getting bigger and bigger. And it began to, I could actually see sort of mottled shades of gold and I don't know, richer gold on it. And I thought, am I going to burn up?
I've heard that before, where people don't want to return to their body. They want to stay where they are. They're like, nope, I'm done with that. They don't miss their physical being at all. They want to stay in spiritual form. Right through the surface, like it was some kind of very fragile filament. And I felt myself break through it, and I was in the center of the sun. And in the sun was, as you might guess if you've heard other NDE stories, the light. And this was, it always makes me cry, but for this insecure, love-starved, showing off constantly to get love, little 22-year-old, it was everything I had ever wanted I had. I was absolutely filled with love. It just permeated every part of me. It felt warm. It felt wonderful. And then I became aware of a sort of focal point or source, that I was being held like a baby, like someone cradling me like an infant. And this was some sort of figure that I had a sense, though I could see nothing but the light, I had a sense they were sort of like sitting on the ground and holding me like a baby and just pouring love. You are so loved. You are so loved. And I thought back, I love you. I love you. And then just kind of like all blurred into just love. Love is. And I would have wanted to stay that way forever. But all of a sudden, the parent just said, you can't stay. You're not done yet. Boom, light is gone, and I'm in blackness. Not only that, well, first, actually, I have to stay very clear. When I heard that, I threw a fit instantly, and I just felt like, I remember being a real little kid and just making up your mind, I am going to show them that I am a force to be reckoned with. Like, that's how I felt towards that voice. And I wanted to kick the parent in the shins. I just wanted to
to change their mind. You've got to let me stay. You're not sending me. I didn't even know what back was. But then I felt that not only was it pitch black, but I felt myself dropping. And then I became scared. That's the only time I would say that I was afraid. And it was actually more like an instant of terror. Where am I going? What's happening? Why did I lose the light? And then I began to see these little chalk figures in the blackness, as though the darkness itself were a blackboard, and these were little figures. And they were delighted, and they were doing these little cartwheels, and they had swing sets and teeter-totters, and they were laughing and doing cartwheels, and they were saying little rhymes, like, I can never remember the rhymes, but they were nonsense. They were just like, how many hippos make a flim-flam? And then they'd laugh, and then they'd say something else, and I thought, well, this is nowhere near as good as the light. That's what I thought. But I think the parent has given me this to entertain me until I can return to the light, because I am returning to the light. So this is just to kind of pass the time until I can go back. So I'm watching them, just like if you're watching Saturday morning cartoons, with that same kind of feeling of passivity. But then one of them starts getting closer, and he starts to like block out the other ones. And I'm trying to see around him. But then I hear what he's saying is, how many fingers? What is your name? And all of a sudden I have this horrible realization. And the first part was, he thinks he's a him and I'm a someone else. He thinks we're separate, which is so dumb. And he thinks that I'm supposed to burp out this code. He's burping code to me. I'm supposed to burp code back. And that's how we send messages back and forth, which is so stupid and primitive. And I just felt like, no, I know what he wants me to do. And this is what I actually thought. He wants me to move that big loafy thing that's down there in the garage. And by garage, I meant that I had begun to have a feeling of myself being back here, and then downstairs, just like if it was under your apartment, you had your car parked in a garage. That's how I thought of my mouth, and I thought of my tongue as this thing in there. He wants me to move that around and shoot air over it. And so I just felt like if somebody said, you're going to spend 80 years in kindergarten, it's going to be great. You can play with blocks. You can do cut and paste. There's Lego. And you just feel like, I can't do that for 80 years, Or I guess I didn't really think about it in terms of my life, but just being sentenced to that for a huge period of time. But then I just felt like, okay. So I said 3, because he had 3 fingers, or because it was 2. And then I said Louisa. And then I was back. So I had a huge puddle of water around me that had just come out when I came back. I had been gray and dead and unresponsive until suddenly I was back. And the bartender was doing CPR for those 3 minutes, but I just don't think that can explain. A friend of mine, Jeff Driscoll, proposed that he moved the lidocaine around in my bloodstream enough that it was able to be absorbed by more cells. But how does that happen in 3 minutes if I've had enough to kill me and then I'm back and I'm fine?
Really interesting one. She was dead for 3 minutes and then she's back. Like, that's wild. This was a really good near-death experience. My intention for this channel is for people to be able to learn about death by listening to people who have been there. And when you learn about death, then you learn how to live. And if you learn how to live, you get the most that you can out of this life while you're here, because we're only here for a very short amount of time. Very short. 70 years is not that much. And that's about the range, give or take a few. Some people die sooner than that. Some people live longer than that. But the average is around 70 years for an American. And that is not very long. That's not a lot of time. So yeah, while we're here, let's absorb all that we can. Let's learn all that we can. Let's experience all that we can. Those are my intentions. So anyways, if this story stuck out to you, please leave it in the comments. Tell me what part you liked, what part you didn't like, what makes sense to you, what doesn't make sense to you. Let's talk about it. Until next time, soul travelers, this has been Janae. But Death Story's Living Truth.
Before you leave tonight, take one deep breath with me. Life is fragile, life is sacred, and none of us are promised tomorrow. So say the thing, make the call, forgive the person, live while you still can. Thank you for being here, soul travelers. Good night, and I will see you soon.